I need you to quit believing in any way that somebody's going to come and take your guns or it's unconstitutional or whatever it may be. Who cares about all that right at this moment? Right at this moment, all we need to do is try to some way break the chain of this killer that's eating us alive. That's all we need to concentrate on.
You know, in March of last year, the governor of West Virginia declared a state of emergency, and that was right after the West Virginia legislature got out of session. And from that time until now, he has remained ruling our state from this declaration of a state of emergency. So we've been in a state of emergency from March of last year until now. And the statute, that the emergency powers statute in West Virginia, allows, in the event of a disaster zone, a disaster with a disaster zone, the governor can control somebody going in or out of that disaster zone or occupying any premises in that disaster zone. So with our governor's logic, by declaring the whole state a disaster zone, he gets to control the movement of all people within the state and the occupancy of all structures within the state. And it's absolutely absurd, and it's time to stop. You know, I found this 1901 West Virginia civics book for public school students in West Virginia, 1901. And let's take a look at some of the things that they taught students, public school students here in West Virginia in 1901. It taught them about the different types of governments throughout history and that existed at that time in 1901. Specifically, then it talks about what we have, a democratic republic, which is one in which legislation is accomplished not directly by the people, but indirectly through elected representatives, as in the case of every state in the Union. The efficiency of a republic depends upon the wisdom and virtue of its citizens. Education, virtue, and experience in the habits of self-government are essential to their welfare. But the habits and modes of thought of a people must, in the end, determine the particular form of government best adapted to their characters and necessities. It then goes over the West Virginia Constitution, and the federal Constitution would teach students about this, but it specifically just blows my mind here. Here it's instructing students here in 1901 on the three departments of government. And the three departments of government, and both that are in West Virginia and in the federal government. The powers and functions of government in the federal Constitution, as well as in every state constitution, are set off into three coordinate departments, that is, departments of equal rank and authority. These departments are the legislative or lawmaking department, the executive or law enforcing department, and the judicial or law interpreting department. This feature of distinct separation of powers does not prevail in any European government to the same extent that it is carried in America, nor did it prevail in America in colonial times. It's a modern feature first introduced by a Frenchman by the name of Montesquieu, who in 1748 published his book on government called The Spirit of Laws. This book was extensively read by scholars all over the world and left a deep impression, particularly in America. There's no doubt that it was the cause of the insertion in our constitutions, that includes West Virginia, of provisions for the separation of the three departments of government so that each class of powers is carried out by a different set of men. Or as now we would say, well, I don't know that we would even say women now, but we used to say men and women. 1901, we just said men. The Constitution of West Virginia therefore provides that, quote, the legislative, executive, and judicial departments shall be separate and distinct so that neither shall exercise the powers properly belonging to either of the others, nor shall any person exercise the powers of more than one of them at the same time. That says nor shall, and this is in our Constitution, except that the justices of the peace shall be eligible to the legislature. And then they include some caveats here. And again, this is 1901. This broad declaration has to be somewhat liberally construed for the right of the governor to veto laws is a legislative act, and the right of the Senate to approve or reject the appointments of the governor to office, together with some other limited exercises of power, constitute minor exceptions to the principle. So those were minor exceptions to the mandate in our state constitution that there would be 3 separate divisions of our state government, so that, because it was set up as a democratic republic, because that is the way that the framers of our country designed our country to work, according to really what were sort of radical liberty ideas at the time. And that is ensconced in our West Virginia Constitution. But again, now we've been ruled by one man for going on a year now, and that's not an exaggeration, who has had no check on his powers, who's literally is restricting people in a way that has never been done before in American history, ordering them to stay in their homes. The stay-at-home order is still in place as of right now, February of 2021. That stay-at-home order, it was from like July of 2020. So over 6 months now, we've been ordered to stay at home. We're ordered to wear certain things over our face by order of the law, or else we be arrested, our businesses closed, and many, many other things, going on. Probably 100 executive orders so far, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages, all from one man. And just in the news today, let me show you, was a press conference from Governor Justice. And take a look at this. And this is what inspired me to make this video today. There was a peasant at his press conference, or his virtual town hall, who had the gall to ask him about efforts in the legislature right now to rein in his so-called executive powers, which really should not be interpreted to be what they are in the first place. But since courts will not restrain these tyrants in other states, including ours, this is what we have to do. We have to have the legislature do it. So our legislature has put forth a bill that will basically set a 60-day time limit before the legislature, again, the voice of the people in this book, according to what we used to be taught, the voice of the people, that is our participation in our own self-government. But somebody asks this embarrassment of a governor who just happens to be the richest guy in the state, the only billionaire in the state of West Virginia. Look at him. The only billionaire just happens to be governor. Damn, what a coincidence. What a coincidence. Could it be that somebody who has $1 billion is able to buy any political seat in the state that he wants? That he can buy friends? That he can buy the destruction of his enemies? That he can buy political favors? No, I'm sure it's a total coincidence that the richest guy in the state, the only billionaire, just happens to be our governor. And there's far as I know, no inspiring creation story, no rags to riches story. It's my understanding that he was just born into it, and here he is. So some lady has the gall to ask him during this press conference, where is it? It's up here. Well, I thought it was in here somewhere. So lawmakers were divided by an amendment proposed by Delegate Pat McGeehan, a patriot, military veteran, as opposed to, just a member of the Lucky Sperm Club, that simply would have specified the time limit that would have applied to the current state of emergency, which was voted down, unfortunately. All right, here it is. Justice seemed to take umbrage about all that when a West Virginia resident, Rita from West Union, asked him about the emergency powers restrictions during a town hall event this week. And here's his answer. Well, I hope and pray we're not going to get in a food fight. And he likes to use that word. We're not going to get in a food fight over emergency powers. So if you point to the Constitution, what does he do? He minimizes, he mocks you. He calls it a food fight. Oh, it's nothing but a food fight. because he's not out to take power. He doesn't want to be governor. He doesn't want to be there. He had a calling, just a calling from Christ to be there to shepherd his flock through this difficult state of emergency that's lasted over a year. And how dare anybody begin a food fight over these emergency powers that he doesn't want. He doesn't want these emergency powers. He doesn't want absolute power. Just like no king, no dictator in the history of mankind, they've never wanted it. It's just been a burden on them that they're, some higher being has put on their shoulders, and it's their therefore it's their God-given responsibility to see their flock through this difficult time. So I hope and pray we're not going to get in a food fight over emergency powers and who has the power to do this and that. I think it's frivolous is the right word to think that a Pat McGeehan, who is this legislator, military veteran, self-made man, as opposed to Governor Justice, who got elected to office to be the voice of the people, the voice of his constituents. So really, who's the governor talking to here? He's talking to West Virginia citizens. He's talking to us, but he's specifically talking to the citizens of Delegate McGeehan's district. I think it's frivolous to think that Pat McGeehan, i.e. his peasants, if he was sitting in this job, could do this job. The same man saying the governor's being a dictator. Are you kidding me? I just want to do the job. Yeah, just like Cuomo. Just like Cuomo. And I wonder when the book's going to come out. So, as this news site notes, for almost a year now, Justice has been making decisions about the coronavirus pandemic with orders based on his own state of emergency declaration from March 16th, almost a year now, in a section of state code describing the governor's emergency powers. And this is the section that he has used to do everything that he's done, from the mask mandate, ordering you to stay home, closing your barbershops, your hair salons, closing your restaurants, deciding on random percentages of customers that you can have in your business, taking your private property, your livelihoods without any sort of compensation, forcing your kids to stay at home. This is the authority that he has used from the legislature that he says cannot be limited at this point because it's just a food fight, is to control ingress and egress that's coming and going to and from a disaster area or where a large-scale threat exists, the movement of persons within the area and the occupancy of premises therein. All right, so what was that? What was our legislature thinking when they first put that language into a statute? Well, if you have a flood or you have a forest fire, you, by definition, are going to have a disaster area, a disaster zone. Do you want people ingressing and egressing, coming and going from that disaster zone, from the area of the fire or the area of the flood? No, you want to be able to control and stop just random people from going in there so that the first responders can go in and save lives and save property and so on. You control coming and going into a disaster zone, and you can control the occupancy of premises therein. You can evacuate people. You can lift rules on occupancy so that you can have shelter areas in a building that otherwise is limited to 100 people, but you can lift that red tape and have 300, 400, 500 people in that shelter area. That is clearly what was anticipated by the legislature in allowing the governor to coordinate these disaster zones. It did not anticipate that he would just declare the entire state a disaster area. And therefore, look, he gets to control the movement of all people and the occupancy of all premises thereon. And did they also anticipate that this would just be an indefinite time period? It would be ongoing? No. First, we were told 14 days, 15 days. And then I filed a lawsuit to try to bring the legislature back into session, to have a special session of the legislature, because they're being left out of this. Are the voice of the people, our elected representatives, have no say in how the state is being run during this time. All these new laws, with real consequences. We have no voice in it. Who are we to complain to? And I mean, does that book mean nothing? The 1901 book about how our government is set up, the three branches of government, and that with limited exceptions, such as the veto power or the approval of appointments by the Senate, they have to stay within their branches of government, that we're a democratic republic? Would our founding fathers, or even our state founding fathers who were at the Constitutional Convention for our state in the 1870s, would they have believed that this was possible for an 11 and a half month period, now almost a 12-month period, that we have no three branches of government, that the dictates of one man during that entire period created all new laws that not only were regular laws of which we would obey in any regular year, but such outrageously radical new laws, basically forcing people to, how is it any different than all of a sudden we're wearing burqas on our faces? We're covering our faces with massive social implications. We're making decisions with massive health implications, really. And who knows what the effects of all these people, these compliant sheep who are wearing masks all day, depending on what their jobs are, all day, working in Walmart, working in the dollar store, working in the DMV, not that they're open, but I'm sure they're being forced to wear masks, working in the colleges. Everywhere people are wearing masks. What is the cost going to be? And if it turns out to be high, who are we to complain to? Our legislators? Do we complain to our legislators? Well, they haven't really had any part in it. Now, this one man and a few other supporters in our legislator, Delegate McGeehan, tried to limit the governor, trying to take on the governor. And look what he does. He insults him. And who is he to throw stones? He insults him in the statewide news media, says that, well, he couldn't do it. You know, he's not a billionaire. He wasn't a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. He wasn't born into being a billionaire. I mean, what does he know? So here we are. We have a state legislature, which was supposedly part of a red wave with a 70-80% supposed Republican majority. But remember, a reminder, that doesn't mean conservative majority. That doesn't mean constitutionalist majority. When you're a billionaire, you can buy a lot of things. And it'll be interesting to follow the money trail and see what's been purchased to allow him to retain this power. And even if you like him, which I don't know that I've encountered anybody who actually does, other than who's on his payroll. Maybe I have. It'll be interesting to see who gets what as we get into the future when it comes to the people who are voting. So this is the civil rights issue of our lifetimes. It doesn't have to do with skin color. It doesn't have to do with ethnicity. It has to do with who are we as a country and what sort of government do we have. I don't recall a constitutional convention on a state level or a federal level. Just out of fear and fear alone, just like the Reichstag fire of the 1930s, we have allowed a power grab like has never occurred before in our country. And we've allowed it because of fear. Because of fear. And through the fraud, the fiction that we have this benevolent governor who is just looking out for his flock of sheep. Just looking out for his flock of sheep. But what do you think gets said when, behind the cameras? What do you think gets said behind the cameras? I don't know. I'd like to know. Do you think that the governor and all the special, more important people, do you think they follow all the guidelines that the peasants do?
Again, I encourage all businesses that are allowed to open to do so only if they can follow the guidelines to keep West Virginia safe.
So that's about it. Let's see if our legislature can rein them in, because the courts, unfortunately, aren't going to do it.